The wind screamed across the frozen peaks like something alive. Not the ordinary howl of a winter storm, but a long, mournful cry that echoed through the endless wilderness of the northern Ural Mountains. Here, where temperatures plunged below -30 degrees and the snow buried everything in silence, even experienced mountaineers feared the darkness. Then came the discovery. A search team climbed the windswept slope, expecting to find 9 exhausted hikers sheltering from the blizzard. Instead, they found something far more disturbing. A tent, half buried beneath the snow. At first glance, nothing seemed unusual. But as they drew closer, an icy feeling settled over them. The canvas wasn't simply damaged. It had been slashed open from the inside. Whoever had been inside hadn't used the entrance. They had cut their own escape. Inside the tent were heavy winter coats, boots, backpacks, cameras, food, and personal belongings. Everything needed to survive one of the coldest places on Earth had been abandoned. Yet the people who owned them were gone. Outside, a line of footprints disappeared into the darkness. Some were barefoot. Others wore only socks. They led away from the only shelter for miles, into a freezing wilderness where death could come within minutes. Weeks later, rescuers began uncovering the bodies. 2 lay beneath a towering cedar tree, their hands torn and burned, as though they had fought desperately to climb or build a fire. 3 more were scattered across the snow, frozen in positions that suggested they had been struggling to return to the tent. Months later, when the mountain finally loosened its grip on winter, the remaining 4 were found buried deep beneath the snow in a nearby ravine. Their injuries defied explanation. Broken ribs, crushed skulls, massive internal trauma. One young woman was missing her tongue. There were no signs of a struggle. No footprints from an attacker. No evidence of murder. No survivors left to explain what had happened. The official Soviet investigation closed with one chilling sentence. The hikers died because of an unknown compelling force. What happened on that mountain during the night of February 1st, 1959? Did nature unleash a nightmare no one understood? Was there a secret the Soviet Union never wanted revealed? Or did the lonely mountain witness something so terrifying that 9 experienced explorers fled into the frozen darkness, choosing the deadly cold over whatever waited outside their tent? More than 6 decades later, the Dyatlov Pass Incident remains one of the most haunting mysteries in modern history. Today, we return to that mountain. In the winter of 1959, the world stood divided. On one side was the West. On the other hand, the Soviet Union, a nation wrapped in secrecy, where military projects vanished behind locked gates. Classified files disappeared into government archives, and entire regions were hidden from public maps. It was an age of suspicion. The Cold War had turned silence into a weapon. Rumors spread like wildfire, but the truth was often buried beneath layers of official secrecy, far from the bustling cities of Moscow and Leningrad. Beyond the reach of crowded streets and electric lights, stretched one of the most unforgiving landscapes on Earth, the northern Ural Mountains. For hundreds of miles, there was almost nothing. No villages, no roads, no rescue stations, only endless forests, frozen rivers, jagged peaks, and a silence so complete that many travelers claimed it felt as though the mountain itself was listening. The indigenous Mansi people had lived in these lands for centuries. They respected the mountains deeply, passing down stories of places where nature demanded humility. While they hunted and traveled through the region, they understood that a single mistake in winter could mean death. To outsiders, however, these mountains represented something else: adventure, honor, challenge. Across the Soviet Union, university students trained for difficult expeditions through forests, deserts, rivers, and snow-covered peaks. Completing the highest levels of these journeys earned respect throughout the country. Only the strongest, most disciplined hikers attempted the most dangerous routes. One destination stood above the rest: Mount Otorten. Its remote location and brutal weather made it one of the ultimate tests of endurance. Reaching its summit required crossing windswept ridges where blizzards could erase every track within minutes. Temperatures routinely plunged below -30 degrees Celsius, and hurricane-force winds could strike without warning. Yet, for a team of skilled young adventurers, this was exactly the challenge they had been preparing for. Leading them was a quiet, intelligent engineering student named Igor Dyatlov. He was only 23 years old, but among his peers, he had earned a reputation for calm leadership, careful planning, and remarkable survival skills. He believed that preparation could overcome almost any obstacle nature placed in his path. His companions trusted him completely. They had crossed mountains together before. They had survived bitter winters. They knew how to navigate by compass under whiteout skies. If anyone could conquer the northern Urals, it was this team. None of them could have imagined that they were walking toward a place that would one day bear their leader's name, not as a monument to triumph, but as a memorial to one of history's greatest unsolved mysteries. Long before the first rescue team arrived, long before the torn tent, long before the frozen bodies, the mountain was waiting, and somewhere beneath its endless blanket of snow, a mystery was already beginning to take shape. Every mystery begins with names. Before they became headlines, before investigators searched the frozen wilderness, before theories, documentaries, and endless speculation, they were simply 9 young people chasing adventure. They laughed together, studied together, dreamed about the future. None of them knew they were stepping into the final chapter of their lives. Their leader was 23-year-old Igor Dyatlov, an engineering student known for his calm mind and unwavering determination. Friends described him as thoughtful, disciplined, and remarkably resourceful. He planned every expedition with meticulous care, checking routes, equipment, and weather forecasts again and again. If danger appeared, everyone looked to Igor. Among the group was Zinaida Kolmogorova. Energetic, kind, and endlessly optimistic, Zinaida had an infectious smile that brightened even the harshest winter camps. She loved the outdoors and had already completed numerous demanding expeditions. Friends remembered her as someone who refused to give up, no matter how difficult the journey became. Then there was Lyudmila Dubinina. Strong-willed and fearless, Lyudmila possessed a determination that often surprised those around her. During a previous expedition, she had continued hiking, despite suffering severe pain from an accidental gunshot wound to her leg. Her resilience had become legendary among fellow hikers. Rustem Slobodin was known for his physical endurance. An engineer with a passion for long-distance hiking, Rustem rarely complained about hardship. Whether crossing frozen rivers or climbing steep ridges, he pushed himself beyond ordinary limits. Alexander Kolevatov brought quiet intelligence to the team. Reserved and analytical, he studied nuclear physics and approached every challenge with patience. He preferred observing before speaking, earning the respect of everyone around him. Nikolai Thibault-Brignol was one of the strongest members of the expedition. Athletic, adventurous, and always eager for the next challenge, he possessed the confidence that comes from experience. Friends admired both his strength and his generosity. The oldest member was Semyon Zolotaryov. At 38, he was considerably older than the others and a decorated veteran of the Second World War. His rugged appearance and mysterious past fascinated the younger hikers. Though relatively new to the group, he quickly earned their respect through experience and determination. The final two members were close friends. Yuri Doroshenko was fearless and energetic, famous for stories of standing his ground against wild animals during earlier expeditions. His courage inspired those around him. Yuri Krivonishenko was cheerful, humorous, and creative. He often sang songs around the campfire, helping lift spirits after exhausting days in the snow. Wherever Yuri was, laughter usually followed. Originally, however, there had been 10. Yuri Yudin joined the expedition with the same excitement as everyone else. But only days into the journey, severe pain from illness forced him to make the heartbreaking decision to turn back. His companions hugged him goodbye. They joked that they would see each other again once the expedition was over. Yudin watched as his friends disappeared into the snow-covered forest, their figures growing smaller until the white wilderness swallowed them completely. It was the last time he ever saw them alive. For the remaining 9, the adventure had only just begun. Their backpacks were packed. Their cameras were loaded with fresh film. Their spirits were high. None of them could see the invisible line they were about to cross, a line between the known world and a mystery that would haunt generations. Years later, investigators would study every photograph they took, every diary entry they wrote, every footprint they left behind, searching for the moment when an ordinary expedition transformed into an unspeakable nightmare. But by then, the mountain had already claimed its secret. On January 23, 1959, the journey finally began. The 9 explorers boarded a train that carried them east, deeper into the vast Soviet wilderness. Through the frosted windows, cities slowly disappeared, replaced by endless forests wrapped in snow. Civilization faded with every passing mile. Inside the train, the mood was light. They laughed, played cards, shared stories. Their cameras captured smiling faces, playful moments, and the excitement of another adventure waiting beyond the horizon. None of those photographs hinted at the darkness that lay ahead. After days of travel, they reached the last inhabited settlements. From there, they climbed aboard an old truck that rumbled over icy roads, carrying them toward the edge of the known world. The farther they traveled, the fewer signs of human life remained. Eventually, even the road ended. There were no more villages, No telephone lines, no lights glowing in distant windows. Only snow. Endless, untouched snow. The hikers strapped on their skis, tightened the straps of their heavy backpacks, and stepped into the silent wilderness. Each breath turned instantly into white clouds. Each footstep disappeared beneath fresh snowfall. The forest welcomed them with an eerie stillness. Towering pine and cedar trees stood motionless, their branches weighed down by thick layers of ice. The only sounds were the scrape of skis across frozen ground and the whisper of wind threading its way through the trees. As the days passed, the group settled into a rhythm. They hiked for hours across frozen rivers and snow-covered valleys. They pitched their tents before nightfall. They melted snow for drinking water. They laughed around small campfires while the darkness gathered beyond the circle of light. Their journals spoke of difficult terrain, aching muscles, and breathtaking scenery. Their photographs showed snowball fights, smiles, and companions helping one another through deep drifts. To anyone looking back, they seemed completely at ease. But the mountains were changing. The weather grew colder. The wind became stronger. Clouds rolled across the sky like an enormous gray blanket, swallowing the sun earlier each afternoon. Sometimes, the silence became so complete that it felt unnatural. No birds, no animals, not even the crack of distant branches, only an emptiness that seemed to stretch forever. Then, occasionally, the wind would return, not as a gentle breeze, but as a long, mournful howl, echoing through the valleys. It sounded almost human. At night, as they lay inside their tents, that sound drifted across the mountains. Sometimes it rose into a piercing scream. Sometimes it faded into a low whisper. The hikers were experienced enough to know that wind could play strange tricks in rugged terrain. And yet, some later wondered what it must have felt like to hear those sounds while surrounded by complete darkness, knowing that no help existed for hundreds of miles. Every morning, they continued forward. The route became steeper. The trees began to disappear. The shelter of the forest gave way to open slopes where the wind struck with relentless force. Ahead stood the barren mountains of the northern Urals, cold, exposed, and unforgiving. The closer they came, the more the landscape seemed to lose all signs of life. No tracks, no movement, nothing but snow stretching toward the horizon. The expedition was still going according to plan. At least, that's what everyone believed, because somewhere beyond those frozen ridges, hidden behind curtains of blowing snow, the final night of the expedition was already waiting, and the mountain had begun to close in around them. By the end of January, the wilderness no longer felt like an adventure. It felt like a warning. The trees that had once sheltered the hikers were now behind them. Ahead lay a vast, exposed mountainside where nothing stood between them and the fury of the Arctic wind. The mountain was known by the local Mansi people as Kholat Syachlach. Its name has often been translated as Dead Mountain. The barren slope lived up to its reputation. No forests, no wildlife, no shelter, only endless white snow stretching beneath a gray, lifeless sky. The wind swept across the mountainside with terrifying force, lifting clouds of snow into the air until the horizon disappeared completely. Visibility shrank to only a few dozen meters. The world became nothing but white. On the morning of February 1st, 1959, the hikers continued climbing. Progress was slow. Every step demanded effort. Their heavy backpacks pulled at their shoulders, while icy gusts threatened to knock them from their skis. Still, no one suggested turning back. They had trained for conditions like these. They trusted their leader, and they believed tomorrow would bring better weather. Throughout the day, cameras clicked. One photograph showed members of the group struggling uphill through blowing snow. Another captured a lone figure disappearing into the white haze, almost swallowed by the storm. Their faces were difficult to recognize beneath layers of scarves, goggles, and frost-covered clothing. Looking at those photographs today, they seem almost ghostly. Frozen moments suspended in time. No smiles. No celebration. Only dark silhouettes surrounded by an endless sea of snow. As evening approached, the storm intensified. Powerful winds drove snow across the mountainside, erasing their tracks almost as quickly as they were made. Instead of descending into the nearby forest, where trees could have provided protection from the wind, the group chose to establish camp on the exposed slope. Historians believe this decision may have been made to avoid losing altitude, or because worsening visibility made reaching the forest difficult. Whatever the reason, it would become the last camp they ever built. Working quickly against the bitter cold, the hikers pitched their large canvas tent into the frozen slope. They anchored it with skis, poles, and carefully packed snow. Inside, they removed heavy boots. They organized the equipment, prepared food, wrote the final entries in their journals. Perhaps they talked about tomorrow's climb. Perhaps they laughed together one last time. Perhaps someone told a joke that echoed briefly inside the canvas walls while the storm raged outside. No one knows. Because after that evening, the cameras fell silent. The journals ended. The laughter disappeared. Those final photographs became the last visual record of 9 people who were still alive. Outside the tent, darkness settled over Dead Mountain. The temperature plunged even lower. The wind howled across the empty slope with such force that it sounded less like weather and more like something searching. Somewhere beyond the thin walls of that canvas shelter, something happened. Something so sudden, so terrifying, that 9 experienced mountaineers abandoned every instinct that had kept them alive. They left behind their boots, their coats, their supplies, and stepped barefoot into one of the deadliest winter nights imaginable. What drove them into the darkness remains one of history's greatest unanswered questions. But by sunrise, the mountain would keep its silence, and the nightmare would already be over. The days passed. Far away from the mountains, no one knew that something had gone terribly wrong. The hikers were expected to return after finishing their journey. They planned to send a message as soon as they reached the end of their route, but no message came. At first, nobody was worried. The group was experienced. Bad weather often delayed mountain expeditions. A day or 2 late was normal. So everyone waited. One more day passed. Then another, still. Nothing. The silence began to feel strange. Families looked at the calendar again and again. Friends wondered why they had not heard from the group. The waiting became harder with each passing day. Finally, the hikers' families asked the authorities for help. A search team was organized. At first, it was made up of students and teachers from the same university. Soon, more people joined. Experienced mountaineers, soldiers, police officers. Even helicopters flew over the snowy mountains, searching for any sign of the missing hikers. The weather made everything difficult. Strong winds blew fresh snow across the ground, covering tracks and hiding clues. The mountains seemed to erase every sign that people had ever been there. Day after day, the search teams moved deeper into the frozen wilderness. They called out the hikers' names. No one answered. They searched the forests. Nothing. They searched the valleys. Nothing. Only the sound of the wind echoed through the empty mountains. The deeper they went, the stranger the place felt. There were no birds singing, no animals running through the snow, only endless white hills and dark forests, standing in complete silence. Some rescuers later said they felt as if they were being watched. Every step filled them with more fear. Something didn't feel right. Then, on February 26th, nearly a month after the hikers had disappeared, one of the search teams climbed the slope of Dead Mountain. In the distance, they saw something dark beneath the snow. As they moved closer, their hearts began to race. It was the tent. It was still standing, but something was terribly wrong. The nightmare was about to begin. The answers they had come to find would only create more questions. The rescuers stood still. For a moment, no one spoke. The tent was half covered by snow. Standing alone on the empty mountainside, there was no smoke, no voices, no movement. It looked as if the mountain had swallowed everyone inside. The search team walked closer. The cold wind pushed against them as they reached the tent. Then they saw something that made their blood run cold. The side of the tent had been cut open, not from the outside, but from the inside. The hikers had used a knife to slash through the thick canvas. Why? The front entrance was still closed. Why would 9 experienced hikers destroy their own tent instead of using the door? The rescuers carefully looked inside. Everything was still there. Sleeping bags, heavy winter coats, warm boots, backpacks, food, maps, cameras, personal journals. It looked as though the hikers had planned to return in only a few minutes. But they never did. Nothing had been stolen. Nothing suggested that a fight had happened inside the tent. It was as if the group had suddenly become terrified and rushed out into the freezing night without thinking. Outside the tent, the rescuers found another clue. Footprints. Many footprints. They led away from the camp and down the mountain. The tracks did not show people running wildly. Instead, they seemed to show the hikers walking away together, into the darkness, into the deadly cold. The rescuers followed the footprints as far as they could, but the wind and fresh snow slowly erased them. Every step deeper into the mountain brought a new feeling of fear. Where had the hikers gone? Why had they left everything behind? What could have frightened 9 skilled mountaineers so badly that they walked into temperatures colder than -30 degrees Celsius, wearing almost no protection? No one had an answer. The mountain remained silent. The wind was the only sound. Then, far below the tent, near the edge of a dark forest, one of the rescuers noticed something unusual. A giant cedar tree stood alone against the snow. Beneath its branches, there was a dark shape, then another. The search team hurried toward the tree. What they found there would become one of the most haunting scenes in the history of unsolved mysteries. The nightmare was only beginning. The rescuers hurried through the deep snow. The dark shapes beneath the giant cedar tree became clearer with every step. Then they stopped. 2 young men lay frozen on the ground. They were Yuri Doroshenko and Yuri Krivonishenko. They were wearing very little clothing. Neither of them had boots. The freezing cold had claimed their lives. Nearby, the rescuers found the remains of a small fire. Only a few burned branches were left. It seemed the 2 men had desperately tried to stay warm. The lower branches of the cedar tree were broken. Some branches were snapped several meters above the ground. It looked as though someone had climbed the tree in great fear, or in a desperate attempt to see something in the darkness. No one knew which. The rescuers searched the area carefully. Then they looked back toward the tent. Halfway up the snowy slope, they found another body. It was Igor Dyatlov. He was lying face down in the snow. One hand was stretched forward, as if he had been reaching for something just beyond his grasp. His body faced the direction of the tent. It looked as though he had been trying to return, but he never made it. A short distance away, another body was found. It was Zenaida Kolmogorova. She, too, was facing the tent. Her frozen body told the same silent story. She had also been trying to make her way back through the deadly storm. The mountain had stopped her. Days later, the search team found the 5th hiker. It was Rustem Slobodin. He was lying farther along the same path. Like the others, he appeared to have been moving toward the tent. 3 people, 3 different places. One desperate journey back to safety. The rescuers stood in silence. Nothing made sense. If the hikers had escaped danger, why had they tried to return? If they had been running from someone, where were the footprints of that person? There were none. Only the tracks of the hikers themselves. The official examinations revealed that the first 5 victims had died mainly from hypothermia. Their bodies had simply become too cold to survive. But there were still strange details. Rustem had a head injury. The 2 men beneath the cedar tree had damaged hands, as if they had clawed at rough bark or struggled desperately in the freezing night. And 4 members of the expedition were still missing. Weeks passed. Heavy snow covered the mountain. Every day, rescuers searched the forests, ravines, and frozen streams. But it was as if the last 4 hikers had vanished into thin air. No footprints, no voices, no clues, only endless snow. Then spring arrived. The ice slowly began to melt. What had been hidden beneath the mountain for months was finally about to be revealed. And what the rescuers would discover next was far more shocking than anything they had found before. Winter slowly released its grip on the mountains. The deep snow began to melt. Streams of icy water flowed through the valleys. For the rescuers, there was only one hope. The last 4 hikers had to be somewhere. The search continued for weeks. Every day, men walked through freezing water, pushed aside heavy snow, and searched every corner of the mountain. Still, nothing. It was as if the earth had hidden them forever. Then, on May 4th, nearly 3 months after the tent had been found, the search team made a shocking discovery. Deep inside a narrow ravine, beneath several meters of snow, they found the last 4 hikers. They were Lyudmila Dubinina, Alexander Kolovatov, Nikolai Thibaut Brignol, and Semyon Zolotaryov. Unlike the first 5 victims, these 4 were wearing more clothing. Some of the clothes appeared to have belonged to the hikers who had died first. Investigators believe the survivors may have taken warm clothing from their friends after they had passed away. A desperate attempt to stay alive in the freezing cold. But it was their injuries that left everyone in shock. Nikolai Thibaut Brignol had a severe skull fracture. Semyon Zolotaryov had multiple broken ribs. Lyudmila Dubinina also had crushed ribs. The force of these injuries was enormous. Doctors later said the damage was similar to what could happen in a powerful car crash. Yet there were almost no serious wounds on the outside of their bodies. It was as though something incredibly powerful had crushed them, without leaving many marks on their skin. Then came the most disturbing discovery of all. Lyudmila Dubinina was missing her tongue. Parts of her lips were also gone. Some of her facial tissue was missing as well. The news spread quickly. People whispered frightening stories. Many believed something terrible had happened on that mountain. Over the years, forensic experts have explained that these injuries most likely happened after death. The body had been buried in snow, exposed to flowing water, animals, and natural decomposition for months. But, at the time, no one knew that. To many people, it looked like something from a nightmare. There were even more strange details. Small amounts of radioactive material were later detected on some items of clothing. How did it get there? No one could say for certain. Every new answer seemed to create another question. The mountain had given back all 9 hikers, but it had not given back the truth. The investigation was now faced with a mystery unlike anything the Soviet Union had ever seen. 9 skilled hikers. 1 abandoned tent. No signs of another person. No clear cause that explained every detail. Only silence. And a mountain that refused to tell its story. The mountain had finally given back all 9 hikers. Now it was the investigators' turn to find the truth. Police officers, doctors, mountain experts, and military officials all examined the evidence. Every photograph, every diary, every footprint, every piece of clothing. They hoped that somewhere among these clues was the answer to the mystery. The cameras were developed first. The photographs showed a happy group. The hikers smiled at one another. They joked during the journey. They built camps. They climbed snowy hills. Nothing in the pictures suggested fear. Nothing showed danger. The diaries told the same story. The group wrote about the cold weather, the difficult climb, and their daily routine. They laughed about small mistakes. They looked forward to reaching their goal. The final diary entries ended like any normal expedition. Then, nothing. The investigators returned to the tent. They carefully measured the cuts in the canvas. Their conclusion was clear. The tent had been cut open from the inside. The hikers had made the cuts themselves. But why? No one could answer. The footprints were also unusual. There were no signs that another group had entered the campsite. No footprints from strangers. No animal tracks. Only the footprints of the 9 hikers walking away from the tent. The bodies were examined by doctors. The first 5 hikers had died mainly from hypothermia. The last 4 had severe internal injuries. Some experts believed those injuries could have been caused by a powerful natural force. Others were not convinced. Then investigators noticed something else. A few pieces of clothing showed small amounts of radioactive material. The discovery raised new questions. Had the hikers been near a military test? Had they unknowingly entered a secret area? Or was there another explanation? No one knew. As the investigation continued, strange stories began to spread. Some people reported seeing glowing orange lights in the night sky around the same time the hikers disappeared. Others believed secret military weapons had been tested in the area. There was no solid evidence proving these stories were connected to the hikers, but the rumors grew stronger. The mystery grew deeper. Soon, the Soviet government closed the area around the mountain. Access was restricted for several years. To many people, that only increased their suspicion. What was being hidden? Months later, the investigation came to an end. People expected a clear answer. Instead, they received one short sentence. The hikers died because of an unknown, compelling force. That was all. No explanation. No suspect. No detailed answer. The case was closed. But for the families, for the investigators, and for people around the world, the mystery had only just begun. Even today, more than 60 years later, one question still remains. What happened on that frozen mountain during the night of February 1st, 1959? The truth may still be buried beneath the snow. The case was closed, but the questions never stopped. If no one attacked the hikers, why did they leave their tent? If it was only the cold, why did they cut their way out? If it was an accident, why were some of their injuries so severe? For more than 60 years, people have searched for answers. Many theories have been suggested. Some are supported by science. Others remain only stories. Let's look at the biggest ones. Many experts believe the hikers heard snow moving above their tent. They may have feared that a large avalanche was about to bury them. To escape quickly, they cut open the tent and walked downhill. Later, in the darkness and freezing cold, they became lost. Some researchers believe a small slab avalanche could explain why they left so suddenly. It may also explain some of the serious injuries found on the last 4 hikers. This is one of the most accepted explanations today. But not everyone agrees. Some investigators say there were no clear signs of a large avalanche at the campsite. So the debate continues. Another theory points to the wind. Some scientists believe powerful winds created strange sounds across the mountain. These low-frequency sounds may have caused fear, panic, or confusion. If the hikers believed the mountain was becoming unsafe, they may have rushed out of the tent. But there is no strong evidence that sound alone would cause 9 experienced hikers to leave behind their warm clothing. Imagine standing on an empty mountain. It is the middle of the night. The temperature is below -30 degrees Celsius. Snow is blowing into your face. You cannot see more than a few steps ahead. In these conditions, even experienced hikers can become confused. Once they left the tent, they may not have been able to find it again. The mountain became a maze of snow and darkness. This theory has fascinated people for decades. Some believe the hikers accidentally entered an area where the Soviet military was testing secret weapons. Supporters of this idea point to reports of glowing lights in the sky and the small amounts of radioactive material found on some clothing. Could the hikers have witnessed something they were never supposed to see? No official evidence has ever confirmed this theory. Many government records remain incomplete or unavailable, leaving room for speculation. In the early days of the investigation, some suspected the local Mansi people, but the evidence did not support that idea. There were no signs of a fight, no footprints from another group, no weapons. Investigators found no evidence linking the Mansi to the hikers' deaths, and they were cleared of suspicion. Over the years, stranger stories appeared. Some people claimed the hikers saw a UFO. Others believed they encountered a mysterious creature. Some even said the mountain was cursed. These ideas became popular because the mystery seemed impossible to explain. But there is no reliable evidence supporting these claims. They remain part of the legend, not the proven history. So, which theory is correct? Was it a natural disaster? A tragic series of mistakes? A hidden military operation? Or something we still do not understand? Every theory answers some questions, but none answer them all. The mountain still keeps one final secret, and perhaps it always will. For many years, the mystery refused to die. New books were written. New documentaries were filmed. Experts from around the world studied the case again and again. Everyone asked the same question. Could modern science succeed where the 1959 investigation failed? Decades after the tragedy, scientists reopened the case. They examined old photographs. They studied weather records. They read the hikers' journals once more. They even used computers to recreate the mountain exactly as it looked on that cold winter night. Snow experts studied the slope where the tent had stood. Their research suggested that a small slab of snow may have broken loose above the campsite. It was not a giant avalanche. It may have been a smaller slide, strong enough to make the hikers fear that more snow was coming. If that happened, leaving the tent quickly would have seemed like the safest choice. Other researchers looked at the injuries. They found that heavy blocks of packed snow could produce a powerful force. That could explain why some hikers suffered severe chest and skull injuries without many wounds on the outside of their bodies. The strange injuries no longer seemed impossible. Nature alone might have caused them. Scientists also studied the missing tongue and facial injuries. Their conclusion was much less mysterious than many people believed. After lying beneath snow and flowing water for months, parts of the body could have been damaged by natural decomposition and small animals. It was a disturbing discovery, but not evidence of a killer. Even the traces of radioactive material were re-examined. Some experts suggested they could have come from the hikers' work or from contamination unrelated to the incident. The small amounts found were not enough to prove a secret military attack. Little by little, science answered many questions, but not all of them. One mystery still remained. If the hikers feared danger from the snow, why did they walk so far from the tent? Why didn't they return sooner? Why did they split into smaller groups? No computer, no scientific model, and no expert has been able to answer every question with complete certainty. Today, many researchers believe the most likely explanation is a tragic chain of events. A small snowslide, a hurried escape, freezing temperatures, darkness, confusion, desperate decisions, one disaster leading to another. It is a theory supported by evidence, but it is still a theory because no one survived that night, and the only true witnesses were the mountain, the wind, and the endless snow. Even after more than 60 years, the Dyatlov Pass Incident reminds us that nature can still be stronger than human knowledge. Some mysteries become clearer with time. Others remain frozen forever. The storm ended long ago. The snow melted. The search teams went home. But the mystery never left the mountain. The place where the tragedy happened was later given a new name. It became known as Dyatlov Pass, in memory of the young leader Igor Dyatlov. Today, people from all over the world travel to see the lonely mountain. Some come to honor the 9 hikers. Others come hoping to understand what happened on that cold night in 1959. The tent is gone. The footprints have disappeared. The campfire beneath the cedar tree has turned to ashes, but the silence remains. The names of the 9 hikers are no longer forgotten. Igor Dyatlov, Zenaida Kolmogorova, Lyudmila Dubinina, Rustam Slobodin, Alexander Kolovatov, Nikolai Thibio-Brignol, Semyon Zolotaryov, Yuri Doroshenko, Yuri Krivonishenko. They were not treasure hunters. They were not soldiers. They were not searching for danger. They were young friends who loved nature. They dreamed of reaching the top of the mountain. Instead, they became part of history. Over the years, the Dyatlov Pass Incident has inspired countless books, documentaries, films, podcasts, and investigations. Every generation asks the same question: what really happened? Some believe science has already found the answer. Others believe an important piece of the story is still missing. Perhaps the truth is simpler than people imagine. Or perhaps the mountain still hides one final secret beneath its snow. One thing, however, is certain. On the night of February 1st, 1959, 9 experienced hikers walked away from their tent. None of them ever returned. The mountain never told anyone why, and maybe it never will. So, the next time you see a lonely mountain covered in snow, or hear the wind crying through the trees on a cold winter night, Remember the 9 hikers who disappeared into the darkness. Remember the tent, cut open from the inside. Remember the footprints leading away into the frozen night. Because some mysteries are never solved. They simply wait, hidden beneath the snow, for someone to ask the question again. What happened at Dyatlov Pass